Hi, Raymond. Thank you for taking time to sit down with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Nice to meet
We
you.
really love the short. Yes, we really love the short. It's super funny. It's super cute. And I love that you're kind of matching Marcy and you're with your flannel on, with your like red flannel. It's cute.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've worked on other Peanuts projects in the past. What was it about One-of-a-Kind Marcy that made you sign on? Did you relate to her or you just like really love the character?
I got really excited when I saw this script. First of all, because it's just like she's such an interesting character. What's I think like the it's easy to think she's just sort of this quiet little kid that doesn't say much. But if like you look at the strips, she may not say much, but sometimes when she does, it can be kind of biting. So she's got a little bit of snark to her, which I thought was fun. And then the other thing I thought was exciting was like to write a story and make your main character someone who doesn't want to be the main character. I thought was really cool. um all the artists that I worked on with this, like they all related to her too. I think, as artists, we like our work to speak for itself, so we really kind of related to her. And so that's what made it exciting, because we thought like, what are some of the different ways we could tell this story to kind of set it apart from the other Peanut specials as well.
So, speaking of other Peanuts specials, and of course, the second I get on, like I'm in a Starbucks, and the second I get on, they're making a smoothie. Like, really? Because that would be Murphy's Law. But no, so speaking of other specials, I know for this one, you guys interviewed an introvert, you worked with an introvert expert. How did that process work? And do you know, is that something that you've done for previous specials or other episodes?
Yeah, if a special has, a certain topic that, maybe there's, more depth that we should learn about, we do bring in a specialist to give us, just, take a look at the script and see if there's things that maybe we're not quite getting right or something. Like, for example, with this one, what was really cool with talking about our specialist was he pointed out, first of all, that there's many different kinds of introverts. Certain traits that we maybe attribute to introverts, it's not really part of being an introvert, like, being afraid of crowds and things like that. He made us also think about the positives of being an introvert. um, when you're someone who's an introvert, it means that you want to take time to think before you act. So you might have a better solution than someone that just wants to jump in. And so it helped us kind of start to shape the script a little bit more to show how those aspects of Marcie that are, introvert, really are good things too.
Kind of piggybacking, I can speak off of that. What aspect of being an introvert did you want to be sure to convey in the special? And were there any that were kind of hard to get right?
Um, well, what we thought was like, with Marcie being someone who's introspective, and she's not the one to jump out and talk like someone like Lucy. Uh, we're like, let's show more of what she's feeling. So that's why if you watch the special, we have a lot of these sort of like fantasy sequences where we're using the art to show you like the emotion she's feeling, whether it's like being overwhelmed or being scared or even relaxed. Um, it let us do that. We also like realized that because we wanted to focus on those aspects of her, we wanted to show more quiet moments, staring at the trees, seeing how the leaves just sort of gently sway in the tree, things that you pay attention to if you're a person who takes time. And so we looked at a lot of like Miyazaki films to try to get some influence and inspiration. We work with this great production designer, Pascal Campion, and his work's amazing. And it's, we could say to him, like, we want this to feel like those moments where you're a little bit sad, but you're overtaken by the beauty of the world. And like he would draw that or paint that. So it allowed us to really, tell the story in a more visual way, which is really exciting.
I love some of the references that you talked about that you used in the special. What other things, or was there something in particular that you learned from Scott that you found surprising or like the most interesting in working with him?
Well, I think it goes back to like him making us focus on the positives of being an introvert too, and also that there are certain things that we think of as being introverted that he says aren't really part of being an introvert. It's a separate thing, like being afraid of crowds and things like that.
A fun question. We love that you were Flash in Zootopia. I swear the DMV scene lives rent free in my mind. My kids quote it. They always go, Nick, like all the time. Whenever they're in trouble, and they get called on it. So if you could be any Peanuts character, who would it be and why?
Well, first of all, with your kids, it's great. It's a great stalling tactic. If they speak slowly, you might forget what
They
you
would hope,
were
yeah.
angry about. For me, okay, which Peanuts character do I think I relate to Linus, because I like that he's this kid that he's got a lot of intelligence, but he has almost the same amount of anxiety. So he tries to sometimes be above it all, but he's got his fears. But I think one of the kids that I think is really fun is a character like Pigpen, because when you read the strips, all the characters have some sort of anxiety or insecurities except Pigpen. He's the one kid that he's dirty and people make fun of him for it, and he's very proud of his dirt. He thinks that it almost makes him a historical reference, I think is one way they put it in the strip. So I really think it'd be a fun thing to tell his story, what led him to be that way and be so confident about himself.
I would watch that because I always want to know, because yeah, he's just always just dirty and hanging out without an
And he's cool
explanation
with
as to why. Like nobody else is dirty, so he's just like, hey, what's up?
Yeah. Take it or leave it.
I feel like a special for each one of the characters would be really fun to kind of get a little bit more of the backstory. Some of the ones that are more like the background characters instead of some of the like core characters that you really know a little bit more about. You've done a lot of animation work over the years, and obviously some directing. Did you always want to direct? How did you make that jump from animation to directing?
I think I did. I love animation, and what I really love about it is like, you're working on these things, you're drawing the characters, you're dictating their every move, but then when it's all done and it's on TV, suddenly they become real little people to me. Like I don't think about the technical stuff. I think in terms of my career, I started on The Simpsons, and I started out as what's called a layout artist, where you draw like the key poses of the characters. And then I was there a really long time, and just slowly I worked up to being an assistant director, and then finally a director. And it's really fun to be a director because yes, you get to create and shape these worlds, and you get to really try to tell the story the best way you can, using the acting, using the visuals and the music, and putting it all together. With these specials, we really worked on them in more like a Disney feature sort of way, where you start with the script, and then as you're boarding it, if you find other solutions, or if you're like, maybe if we don't use this dialogue, we can show it visually. Let's try that. And, have a screening, show it back to the writers and producers and see how they feel, see if it works for them, or if they really were feeling strongly about a line, and having that conversation. And then, talking with the artist and explaining really the emotion of the scene. What I love about being a director too is each department explain what you want people to feel. Like I'll tell a lot of personal stories, like the time I got beat up or bullied by another kid in elementary school, as a way to like have the artists that I'm working with kind of tap into their personal experience too, so that they can put their feelings into the art or the moment. Really, really fun job.
If you can share, what are you working on next?
Well, we just finished another special that's going to come out, I think, early next year, and it's about Franklin. And it's really great. It's like his story is so cool because, it was like in the 60s, there was the assassination of Martin Luther King, and a lot of social unrest. And someone wrote to Charles Schulz and said, I think it's time for you to have a Black character in your strip. Just to see someone that looks like me would mean the world. And he was kind of nervous to do it first because he wasn't sure. He didn't want to feel like, make it look like he was pandering or that he was doing it wrong, but he finally decided to do it. He had some of, the strip was syndicated. There were some newspapers that said, you can't have this. If you do this, we're not going to use that. We're not going to print that strip. And he said, well, if you don't print that strip, then we're done. You don't print any of my strips anymore. And he stuck to his guns. And so Franklin's a really great character. And so to just have a special about him where he's coming from out of town and moving in with these kids, in the story, in his history, his parents are, they work, they're in the army, so that he moves a lot. So he has to make new friends everywhere he goes. He can't make close connections. And then he comes to this town where his tricks don't work because there's a dog that thinks that he's a World War I ace. There's a kid that hangs out in a pumpkin patch and things like that. So it's like, how's he going to fit in with these weird kids? So I'm really excited for people to see that one next year.
I'm really excited. I love Franklin, and I love that's kind of an origin story. I'm here for it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Raymond. It was so great to talk to you about this special and all the work on Marcie and hearing about future projects. So thank you.
Yeah, it was so fun to talk to you. I hope your coffee's ready now.
It might be. I don't know.